Matt Walsh has been described as controversial, but his views are pretty reasonable to those of us who actually believe in biological reality. You know, stuff like that men are men and women are women. Well, his last book on so-called gender identity, Johnny the Walrus, shot to the very top of the bestseller list earlier this year in record time. And he's got a brand new book, and it's poised to do the same very thing. He's also produced a documentary that's one of the most talked about films in all of America right now for a good reason. It's about a very simple question.
Why is that uncomfortable?
Because it sounds actually deeply transphobic to me. And if you keep probing, we're gonna stop the interview.
If I probe about what the truth is?
You keep invoking the word truth, which is condescending and rude. I'm saying to you—
How is the word truth condescending and rude?
Why don't you tell me what your truth is, and you're walking on 30 seconds more of thin ice before I get up.
We will see if Matt found an answer to his simple question. What is a woman, would you please? Welcome back to the show, Matt Walsh. Well, you know, Matt, you just stir it up. And I want to say something to our audience. We are not only glad to have you back, but I've got to say that before we begin tonight, we need to tell our audience the next few minutes with Matt is not necessarily going to be a child-friendly segment. And the reason is because this topic is so important, but it's also rather controversial. And the film that Matt hosts, not for the faint of heart, are for those who are easily offended by blunt, raw language. Moms and dads may want to move children to another room for just a few moments to protect their young ears while we discuss something that has to be discussed. And Matt, I cannot tell you how completely just absorbed I was in the documentary. I watched the whole thing, and I thought this is an incredible, really service to the people of America to expose what's going on in this confusion about gender.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that's one of the things we wanted to accomplish with the documentary was to show that this gender lunacy, this confusion, it is not something that's just out on the fringes. Like, I think for a long time, normal, decent people, conservatives, even Christians, you know, we wanted to tell ourselves that this is something that's just, it's kind of out there, it's just on the fringes, it's a fad, it'll just pass over and we can ignore it. But no, this is everywhere. It is absolutely everywhere. That's one thing we wanted to achieve with the documentary is to actually go on the road across America. We even went to the other side of the world to show just how widespread this is and that it is absolutely everywhere.
When you went to Africa, for example, and you kind of discussed the whole idea of a person could just identify as a person of the other gender and that'd be fine, they laughed at you. I mean, they thought that was the craziest thing they'd ever heard. So is this just an American phobia, issue, concern?
I think it's uniquely modern and Western. So it is a luxury belief system in the West. And one of the reasons we went to Africa is to get outside of that bubble.
Yeah.
And also because we knew that, you know, if we went to a traditional tribe in Africa and they laughed about this stuff, then the left is really in a bind because they can't call them transphobes because that would be racist. So we decided to, you know, just kind of playing their game against them a little bit. But also we wanted to show that this idea that we all take for granted now because it's everywhere, that men can be women, women can be men, all this kind of stuff, that you get outside of this modern Western bubble and it just doesn't exist. It's not just that they disagree with it, it's that they don't even have the language to understand it. It's a concept they've never even encountered before. It's so outside of their experience. And that would be the case also if you went back in time in this country, like 15 seconds almost, and you'd find the same thing.
You know, one of the things that I felt was so powerful in the film, you didn't argue with the people that you interviewed. You let them talk. This is what they say. This is what they believe. They're saying, you're asking them questions and you're letting them answer without arguing. That was powerful.
Yeah, and that's a lot of credit to the team behind the documentary. Justin Folks, our great director, and the producers behind it, because we went into this with this idea that we would just talk to them and ask them questions and let them hoisted on their own petard sort of thing. But then as we started talking to them, I really badly wanted to start arguing and yelling at them. And I kept arguing with our director, like, no, we got to change the whole concept here, because I need to yell at these people. And they had to keep pulling me back and say, no, that's not as powerful as actually just letting them speak, because it's one thing to go and get into a shouting match, right?
Yeah.
But if you give someone the floor and say, okay, go ahead, this is your idea, gender ideology is your idea, explain it to me.
Yeah.
And when they can't do it, then I think that shows everything you need to know.
Well, normally, Matt, you're right about everything. I mean, you're one of the smartest guys I know. But on this case, your team was right. You were wrong. They did exactly what needed to be, because it made the whole thing more powerful in that it wasn't this like a cable news talk show, people yelling over each other. It was letting them talk. And the more they talked, the more I scratched my head and said, these people are crazy. These people are crazy.
They are, or at least they're pretending to be for the sake of their agenda, right? And that's, it occurred to me years ago, in fact, that gender ideology cannot withstand scrutiny.
Yeah.
And that's where the title of the book and the documentary comes from, is, even asking them to define what a woman is, they can't define it, and that's a problem, because if a man says, I identify as a woman, even if I wanted to take that seriously, well, first you have to tell me what you mean by that.
Yeah.
You're identifying as what exactly? What is that? And they can't answer that. And so that was, of course, one of the ideas behind the documentary, is to get out there and ask this question, put it in front of them. But what we discovered is that actually, not only can these people not answer what is a woman, they can't answer any other question at all. They can't answer anything about this ideology whatsoever. And that did surprise me a little bit. Talking to like a college professor, for example, I thought that we would have a good back and forth for a while before we got to the difficult questions, like what is a woman, which is a really hard one, apparently. But what I found is that the minute I asked even one basic skeptical question, everything fell apart. They got very defensive and evasive because they're not prepared to defend this ideology at all.
I think the title of the book, What is a Woman, which is the title of the documentary, the power of that is that it's so doggone simple. And most people say, you mean people don't know? And that is really what I think you will find just amazing. Now, the book and the documentary are called What is a Woman? We're not done talking with Matt. We're going to bring him right back in a moment, so stay put with more with Matt Walsh.